Hey folks, welcome back to part 3 of challenging ficus material. Today we'll be working on repotting this humongous ficus trunk. So let's go, let's get started. First we have to free it from its box. Check underneath, see if your tree is wired into its pot or box. This one hasn't been. Never pull on the trunk, you'll rip the roots. So what you want to use is a potting scythe to free the tree from the box or pot. And we begin by cutting all around. These come in all different lengths and sizes. This is a medium size. I actually have some larger ones. And you go all around every side to free the roots, and then you repeat until you're touching the bottom of the pot. That's why they make very long handles. I can feel the side hitting the bottom of the box, so we know that there's not going to be any more roots clinging. And finally the last one. So, now I'm going to need my assistant, Clancy. Clancy, could you come over here, please? Yeah. Now, what I want you to do is stand on the side and push down on the box, and I'll pull up on the tree. A minute. Okay, let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. That was one heavy tree. Okay. Now, we're going to comb out the roots. We're going to comb them out gently. Always try, if you can, to use a bamboo chopstick. They come in all lengths and sizes. There's thin ones and fat ones, short ones and long ones. This is the size I like the most. But the thing about bamboo chopsticks are they're strong, and also the roots slide off of them, so you're not ripping roots when you're working on this tree. Never start near the trunk. You start on the edges and gradually just tease the roots out. You don't want to leave, you have to free at least the outer roots, because they're the roots. The outer ones are the ones that have spiraled around. Even if it's a rectangular or square pot, they'll still spiral around. So, especially so if it's round or oval. So we have to comb them out, trim them back a little bit. Now this trunk is quite thick, but I don't want to put it in a bonsai pot that's too large, because if it's too large, the tree will look diminished in appearance. So we want to put it in the smallest bonsai container that we can. Especially, I think it's important that you don't want to drown the roots either. Now, my friends in warm climates like Florida or Texas, I have taught in San Antonio, Texas, will say, yes, but we can't put them in small containers. It's so hot here that they dry out. I don't agree with that theory. I think you can use the right size of pot, but just use finer soil mixes that retain more moisture when the tree is watered. That's what I would do. Mind you, I'm not living in the south. At this time of year, I wish I was. It's been snowing up about, in the Laurentian Mountains, not far from here today. So, sometimes it would be nice to live in a nice warm climate where we don't have to worry about snow. But then too, we don't have to worry about hurricanes and many other natural disasters. So you take your choice. I have combed out a lot of the side here. Now we're going to have to do the underneath. As you saw before, I had 2 wedges on this side. So I want to tilt my tree up slightly this way. So I will remove a little bit more soil under the root ball on this side. So Clancy, if you could come and help me again. We'll put the tree on its side. And we'll hold it on the side. Okay, just a bit more. Let it go down. Okay, like that. That's good. Okay, so always start in the edges and work your way inwards. This tree is very healthy, very vigorous. The person we got it from did a very good job of cutting off the thick roots, the roots under the trunk. You can see where the trunk was. It was cut off, and the root ball now is quite shallow, which is a real plus when you're working with trees. Here you can see the shallow root ball right in here. There's some of the old soil left right here, which I don't like. I never leave old soil around the trunk because that causes root rot. So you can see this old black peat muck. That you don't want, folks. Always clean out the old soil around the trunk. Okay, now I'm going to sweep this soil off. We'll turn the tree upside down, the other direction, so I can clean the other side. When you're working with big trees, you really do need an assistant. So thank you very much, Clancy. Okay, turn it the other way. Okay. Here we go. Usually we're working in a very cool area, so I'm not too worried about roots drying out. But you should always have a bottle of, a spray bottle with some water to keep all of these fine feeder roots moist. So that's a must. And never, ever repot outside in the sun. I know some of you don't have a studio to work in, but try to work in a garage or an area at least that's closed. A garden shed. Try to work in an outdoor shelter with a roof and walls if possible that will cut the wind so your tree won't dry out while you're working on it. Here is the spray bottle to keep those roots. These feeder roots are precious. They truly are. That's what keeps your tree alive. The larger roots aren't doing any work at all. They're just pipelines. The feeder roots are absorbing the nutrients and the humidity, sending them through the larger roots up into the trunk and eventually into your leaves. But it's the feeder roots that do all the work, folks. So they are truly very important. Now we have to reduce some of these roots. Some of them are quite thick, the remnants of old roots. So I have to cut them off. For that I use a pair of root cutters, secateurs. They're Masakuni root cutters, very efficient. And you get under there and just remove any roots that are too fat. Always leaving a coif of feeder roots all around the edges. I want to get it into a fairly shallow pot. So you have to make sure that it's the root ball is quite shallow. Now, do you have to treat the root ends? Not really. Sometimes this is a ficus, so it can bleed. There will be some latex. You can put some cut paste. Usually I don't. Usually it'll send out new roots. But to stop the roots from rotting, what I like to do is put a little bit of powdered charcoal on them to prevent any infections or rotting. One last thick root here. It's not too bad though. As I said, the main trunk here is mostly rotting. So again, we can cut out some of this rot and dust it with some, cut it right down to where the wood is healthy and dust it with some charcoal to prevent any further rot setting in. So now we're just going to dust some charcoal dust. So I sift charcoal into different grades for adding some to my juniper bonsai soil. I put 10% of charcoal in with my juniper soil, sometimes with some other trees. And this is the dust that remains from sifting the charcoal. So that's going to protect those roots now. Finding a pot. As I said, if you look at the edge, it's quite thick. Okay, I'm going to remove some of these feeder roots. We don't need all of them, but we don't want to remove all of them. If it's the wrong time to repot, or if you don't have that many, all you have to do is just fold them under, all right? But I've got so many that I am going to cut some back, and then we're going to find a pot. Now I do like to put them in shallow pots. Ficus don't need deep pots. They have very, very strong, vigorous roots. But that said, our root ball is relatively thick. Oops, sorry. You're just gonna have to watch out for your fingers, Clancy, because when I have a pair of scissors in my hand, you have to take a wide berth. Otherwise, you risk losing a finger. Good fertilizer, though, for the bonsai. My first choice, and I don't think it's going to be deep enough, I'll lift it, put it on the other table, please, or just hold it for a moment. Okay, it would be this pot here. Very nice pot. I bought it in Japan, but it's made in China. The color would go extremely well with the ficus. Okay, so let's try it in. I think it's a bit small, but we can cut some larger roots back too. So let's lift it up and see what it looks like. The other way, please. Yep. Okay. We want it facing the camera. Yeah, I don't think we can get it cut back far enough to get it in this pot. Okay, because it's quite wide here. If we look here, it would fit in on this side, might have to carve out a little bit. Here though, in the back, we want it closer to the back, have to cut these big roots. And this side would just fit in if I just shave a little bit here. It's the front part that worries me. I don't think I could cut this back far enough. It's a little bit too bad, but anyway. So let's look at the next one. The next one, unfortunately, lift it up, please. Yeah. The next one is about the same size. These are both 19 inches long. And it's a deeper pot, though. Okay. Yeah. So we've got the same problem with this pot, and I don't have anything between 19-inch pots and 25-inch, except I have one hidden on the side. I wanted to put it into a rectangular pot, but it looks like I'm going to have to find another alternative. So let's take it out here of this pot. It was the right depth though for those roots, and we are going to, whoops, here we go. Try it in this pot here. Okay. Okay, well, it would fit in this pot for sure. Just to show you, we're just going to have to take a little bit off the front, a little bit off the back here, just here. So let's start doing that. I was not planning on putting it in an oval pot, but sometimes here the roots are quite round, okay, in diameter, and rectangular pots are narrower. If you put them into an oval pot, it's wider, so you have much more chance of getting the front and back roots into an oval pot. The color is a little bit dark, but this is an excellent Tokoname ware container that I bought in the 1980s. Could you take the tree out, please, for a moment? And I'll just show you the bottom of the pot. Here. The potter's name is inscribed in the pot, and his stamp also. A very nice, good quality container that dates back to the 1980s. Time to prune the roots. Again, using your handy root pruners. The tree is always off-centered in the pot, sideways to sideways, but also front to back. The tree always goes further toward the back of the pot to give a sense of depth, so you leave a bit more room in the front. But we need to take 2 or 3 inches, shave it off. Again, fortunately, ficus are very strong, and so we'll be removing some of these roots. Now we have to cut them at a downward angle, so when it's watered, the water won't stay on the root. These root pruners are very strong. They give you a lot of cutting power. So we've cut this here. Now we'll cut a little bit in the front and make sure that the tree will fit into the pot. So we've got some thick root right there. We can cut it back. Just going to see where the thick root is. I think I found it. It's over here. This is what's... If we want to try to avoid cutting the feeder roots, but there is some thicker roots up here. Clancy, could you come up here, please? And just hold it a bit like that. Yeah. So I can get in there, carve some of this off the bottom here. These root cutters come in really handy for cutting big roots. We'll try it in the pot and see if it fits. We'll take it out of the pot again. Again, treat the cut root ends with a bit of charcoal, and then we should be ready to get it into the pot. I always mark where I want the front of the pot to be with chalk. It'll erase. Okay, so it'll be there. Why? Because sometimes one side is nicer than the other. Okay, well, we still have to shave off a bit. Let's see where. Just a little bit on this side here, and maybe a little tad right there. Both here and there. Okay, lift it up, please. Okay. are some older roots, but they're not too, there's not too many feeder roots coming off of them, so we can cut them with impunity. So I think we've got this side covered, and whoops, I've got a bit more here. And then we'll go to the other side. The pot tapers down toward the bottom, so we need to taper down the root ball. Over on this side, that some of the roots seemed a little bit too long. Give ourselves a bit of room here. And finally, over here, we've got a big one. This root we can just redirect toward the side. So, just shorten this root a little bit more here. Okay, there we go. We've got the roots shortened now. That the tree should just slide very nicely into the pot now without any problems. We've hardly removed any feeder roots, so we should be good. Now we're ready to see whether it's going to fit into its pot. Just a sec. Here we go. Yeah, so it's in. It's got enough space all around. Over here, there's one root touching. I'll shorten this one a little bit right here, and we'll get some charcoal dust on the root ends and then get it potted up. Okay, now we'll get around to the back. So we're just going to clean up this a little bit more. Okay, a little bit more here. And finally, just a touch more here. We've got the pot ready. As you can see, the drainage holes have screening in the bottom, and they're held in place by these little bow ties here. And then underneath, we've put in our anchoring wires through the anchoring wire holes on each side. And the next step before putting it into the pot is to put a layer of thicker bonsai medium at the bottom of the pot. I call it medium because there's no soil in it. It's actually 70% akadama and 30% chabasai. Chabasai is a form of pumice that comes from southern France. A very effective product. Here we're putting the coarse, and it is quite coarse, making a thin layer on the bottom of our pot. We don't want it too thick because our ficus root ball is quite thick. We don't want the tree sitting too high in its pot. It's a constant process of trying. Okay. Now, I think that's a pretty good height. We do want to lift up that side a bit more, though. So I'll remove some akadama, some of my coarse soil here, and put a little bit more on that side. The nabari of your tree, it's really, really important to remember that the nabari should be slightly above the rim of the pot, so you can appreciate that transition from soil level up into the trunk. So we take it out one last time, and here we will okay, now we'll put it on one side like this. Hold it there, please. Just hold it. Now we thread the anchoring wire through. We have two choices. We can either hold it into its pot with bamboo stakes or tie it over the root system. I think in this case, I'll just tie it over the roots. There we go. So okay, you can see where it's threaded through. Okay, now we lay it down on this side. Do the same thing in the front. We lift it up and we take our anchoring wire here and I will thread it through. Sometimes I have to take a metal stake and thread it through because the roots are so compact. I'll try it with, oh, here we go. I think it's almost through. No. So now we follow, there we go. And same thing on this side. Okay, lower it a bit. Okay, before we put it in the pot, I want to make sure that it's at the right level now and that it's at the right incline. And then we'll throw some mycorrhiza and some osmocote underneath so it won't be lacking in nourishment during the winter months. Not that it needs so much during the winter. Yeah, that's better. Now you can see this side has come out more. It just needs to be a little bit more like this. Okay, hey, looking good, looking good. We have to lift it up carefully, Clancy. We don't want to pull out the anchoring wires. On its side, please. This is Osmocote, good for 5 or 6 months. We put some under here so the tree isn't lacking nourishment underneath. The other side now. This is called Rich Earth. It's actually fulvic and uric acids. It stimulates the root system. It's not a fertilizer though, so we'll throw in a little bit of that, a couple of tablespoons of that. The other side now. Right at the end, we're going to be throwing in some mycorrhiza. The mycorrhiza, it works with pretty well any type of tree, and it's actually a mushroom, a fungus that colonizes the roots of the tree and helps the tree obtain the nutrients it needs, especially phosphorus and potassium. Now you will hold the table, please, Clancy. Okay, and we will. Okay, I want it off center slightly, a little bit more room on this side. Hold the table. Okay, so that we'll balance this long branch here. That's pretty good there. I'm happy with this. So now is tie-in time. We'll tie in the roots. Every time you turn the wire, you have to pull and turn. Pull and turn. Pull and turn. Because this aluminum wire, I prefer using, oops, I was just going to say it breaks easily. Here we go, we broke it. So, it breaks easily. So, pull and turn. We'll cut the excess wire. We'll cut this. Let's tie the front in here. Now, generally, I don't like to see the wire. When I'm putting them in shows, I'll anchor them in with bamboo stakes. But here, we'll show you that another day, how to anchor a tree with bamboo stakes. This tree is pretty humongous, so I think it's going to stay, it's not going to move in its pot. We'll hide the wire under the soil here. This is mycorrhiza. It has to come into contact with the roots. You don't need that much. Maybe a tree this size, maybe a tablespoon is enough. Once it comes into contact with the roots, it colonizes them and it spreads. You'll never see the mycorrhiza though in a ficus, because like most, not all deciduous trees, the mycorrhiza is an endomycorrhiza. So it invades the inside of the root, okay? And so you don't see any white mycelium on the outside of the roots like you do when you repot pines or spruces or larch. It's in there, it's working for your tree, but inside the roots, inside the root cells. Now we'll be potting with some medium size mixture. Now this medium size is exactly the same soil mixture as our larger size that's on the bottom. This is Akadama, 70%, and 30% is Shabasai, or you can call it pumice. They're actually zeolites. Now this is where you want to work your soil mix in under the root ball in every little nook and cranny. Because if there's any empty spaces, the roots that are hanging in that space will dry up and die. They have to make contact with a particle of soil in order to live, in order to absorb humidity and nutrients. So you have to make sure there's no empty spaces. Don't use your chopstick like a dagger. You just spin it back and forth or turn it around like an awl, like this, and work your soil down. And it'll keep on going down, under, and usually it should always be pointed toward your soil, toward the trunk, okay, to work the soil under the trunk. Here it's pretty hard. We don't have that much room on the sides to work it under the trunk. And you keep on adding more and more until no more will go in. You might not think that you can add that much, but actually you can. And to hold it in place, I take my hand, I open my thumb and my index finger, I hold it in place, and then I work the soil medium in between my thumb and my index finger, so it doesn't fall out of the pot. This Akadama costs quite a bit. It has to be imported from Japan. Aka means red, Dama means clay. And so it's expensive to import it, so you don't want to waste it. If you have a whole bunch on the ground after you finish repotting, you've just thrown some money out the window. You know, a lot of my friends have noticed that I'm doing these YouTubes on ficus. And they're coming up to me and saying, hey, I didn't know you grow tropical trees. I didn't know you worked with ficus. Well, guys, I work with anything that I can get, but I don't have a hot or a warm greenhouse, so I really can't keep them in my cold studio during the winter. I send them to a friend's greenhouse, a friend who has a warm tropical greenhouse, but then I have to pay room and board. And that can work out quite a bit because it's based on square footage. So yeah, if you have a nice bright apartment, this ficus, and warm, this ficus will do extremely well for you inside. You're going to need a nice bright window, or you're going to need some LED lights. Okay, so it's still going in. I think this will maybe be the last. Now, if you have too much in the end, it's no problem. There's a little broom. I have brought out a little broom, and you just sweep off the excess and put it back in its container. Now, you see, this one will really get to the bottom. Okay, so yeah, that's doing the job. That's really pushing it. You don't want to fool around too much though with akadama, because if you compact it, it breaks down into a powder. So be careful. Trying to get some soil all around the edges of the pot, because you don't want the cut roots touching the edge of the pot. They have to be in contact, as I said, with the with your soil medium. So it's really important that you get some soil all around the edges of the pot, between the edges of the pot and your roots. Now what I'm doing is I'm removing some of the excess medium-sized soil medium, because I want to put a nice layer of finer bonsai soil. Why? Because it holds water near the surface for the feeder roots, and secondly, if I want to grow a nice moss cover, moss does not grow on coarse soil. If it's too aerated, moss will not grow on it. So I remove some of the excess now that it's all in here. I'll put a thin, very thin layer of fine, and then our tree will be ready to be repotted. I do want to also just make sure I'm going to tap the soil down lightly. No, I say lightly because, again, akadama, if it's compacted, it just breaks down into powder. So you have to be very careful about tamping it down too hard. Got my little tamper right here. And first I tap around the edges so that in the summer, when the pot heats up, the soil won't separate from the edge of the pot. The roots that are there will dry out and die. So I have to compact it a little bit more all around the edges of the pot. There we go. Now once that is done, I'm going to lightly make sure that the soil is tamped down. Again, a question of eliminating air pockets. Very important to tamp the soil down. Not too hard. The last step is some finer bonsai mix. And here, this is the same, again, same soil, 70% akadama, same soil mix, 30% pumice. Now this will also go down once it's watered. So I can leave it a little bit higher, knowing that once it's watered, it will reduce. That is the repotting. Now folks, what I'm going to do is put it in. You have to be very careful when you're watering a newly repotted tree. The soil mixture is very, very dry. And right now, as we speak, it's sucking the moisture out of those nice, fine feeder roots, which is deadly. You have to get it watered as soon as possible. And make sure that the roots are really soaked, okay? So we'll get this, Clancy, if you could bring that bin over here. I'll put a few drops of Super Thrive. We'll fill it high enough so that the water will come up to the rim, and let it soak there for 15 or 20 minutes before taking it out and letting it drain. Okay, here we go, putting it into the bin. Now we're going to fill it up a bit more. We put some Super Thrive. When it's the first repotting like this, we put 35 drops per gallon. Now, that's not very much actually. 35 drops is like less than a teaspoon. Now this is 2 or 3, at least, no, maybe 5 gallons. So I put in about I put in a capful, which is about 120 drops. Now I'm filling this right up to the rim of the pot. The nice thing about it is it'll start absorbing the water, but sometimes I like to water it a bit to settle down the top layer. It's been absorbing the water already, so now we're up to the rim. It's very important to keep this tree happy. The aftercare after repotting is really important too. So what you want to do is keep it in a nice warm place, never in full sun, never exposed to wind for at least 3 to 4 weeks. Now, when I say not in full sun, that can be just morning sun, or a greenhouse is best, or just cover it with plastic on 3 sides, on the top and on the 3 sides. Leave the front open, or spray the foliage often with a little spray can, just with nice room temperature water. But you have to keep that tree happy until the roots have recovered and the tree is sending out new growth. So it's really, really important. Don't fertilize it for at least 3 to 4 weeks. Just let the tree recover. Once you see all the new shoots coming out, then you can start fertilizing again. That's all for part 3, folks. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something from tonight's repotting session. And thanks a lot for following all 3 parts. Thanks a lot, guys.